Hello. I'm going to do an in-depth dive on one artist this time. I think his name is Enrique Nieto. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to say it. This first story is called Can This Be Love? They're on an airplane. They're both getting over an old love, and so they're trying not to come on to one another, but you can tell there's chemistry between them right away. This is a romance comic after all. So they're on the plane, checking each other out, thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to get serious about him. She's gorgeous, but I'm not going to get serious about her. I took a vow. So he goes to the beach the next day, and he's like, oh man, none of these girls turn me on. But that little blonde was pretty cool. So he calls her up, and they go to dinner. I love his little flourishes he does in the backgrounds. Really great stuff. Good night, Charlene. Oh, he didn't even kiss me. Why didn't I kiss her? So they're thinking about each other all night. Some of his work is so elaborate, kind of surreal. And they go to the disco, and finally they break down. Oh, I can't get involved. Oh, yes, I must. Oh, well, I didn't want it to end this way. She's gonna break up. I didn't want it to end this way. So she goes back to New York, but she can't stop thinking about him. And he comes back, and calls her up. Oh yeah, I'll go out with you. And she gets ready in a hurry. And they're out on the town. And in the beautiful skyline, he asks her to marry him. And she goes, yep. And a few weeks later, they're married. The next story is called The Shadow of a Star. This guy and the girl, they're kind of hitting it off. They're going to perform in a summer stock production with this, she's the understudy for this Ray Cole, the movie star. So they're hitting it off really well, and they're practicing the lines until the star comes in. Oh, and he just drops her right away. Thud, drops her on the ground. Oh, hi, Ray Cole. Oh, yeah. So they hit it off, and they're rehearsing, and she's just amazing. She's beautiful. She's talented. But the blonde, the understudy, she's like, well, I guess I can't compete with that. So she starts watching her, and she's like, well, she's not really so beautiful. She's just got her makeup and stuff. And she decides to study her. So she watches all her mannerisms and how she does things. And after a while, she starts to realize, I could do that. So she watches every little move she makes, and then she goes home and practices it. And her parents notice, oh, you've gotten a lot more sophisticated. No problem. So the next day they're waiting for it. So they decide to run through the lines, And he's like, hey, you know, you're pretty good. And she starts doing all the little mannerisms and stuff that the star was doing. And so they're doing the act, and the manager was like, hey, she's really good. So they're rehearsing, and all of a sudden the star comes in. Stop it. Get that witch off the stage. She's just making fun of me. She's taking all my mannerisms and acting like she's me. So she gets mad and she leaves. She's thinking, oh, I'm gonna be out of work now. She'll never let me understudy for her. Look at those backgrounds. She's such a great artist. So the manager comes and says, hey, you know, you were really good, and Cole quit the show. This is your opportunity. So she goes and she performs, and she does really well. And after the show, she gets more and bigger parts as the summer goes on in this theater company. Then finally, after the last show, they're walking together, and he's like, oh, you know, I heard you got an offer to be on a soap opera. Oh yeah, you know, I can be an actress now and make all kinds of money. He's like, well, I learned that I'm pretty good, but I'm not going to be able to make a fortune, so I'm just going to take a job. And she's like, oh, well, you know, that doesn't sound boring to me. And she said, you'll marry me? She says, yes, that's all I ever wanted. Look at those vistas in the background. He's so good. In this next story, the woman has planned her wedding, and she gets jilted by her man, and he leaves her with a plane ticket to Hawaii and a month off, and so she decides just to go by herself. So she's there in Hawaii, and she's met by this guy from the hotel. She's got everything but the groom. So they go to the hotel. Look at that work. And they weren't paying much. I think they were paying like $20 a page or something. And look at all the work he was doing on this. So the guy takes her up to the room and says, well, you know, we got everything ready for the honeymoon suite. The champagne's here. Can I pour you some? She's like, yeah, why not? So she's like, well, I got plenty of time. I guess I'll go to the beach. And she gets on her bikini and goes out to the beach. Everyone's checking her out. Look at the detail on that beach. Not to mention the guy's outfit. And the guy comes up to her, hey, you know, would you like to go surfing? She said, oh, how'd you know it was me? And he said, oh, like, you know, the concierge at the hotel told me to look for the beautiful girl. And she said, oh, you know, I think he was exaggerating. So they do some fancy surfing. She's all over the place. Look at that. And then they go to a luau, and he introduced her to her grandfather. And he explains a bunch of Hawaiian stuff. There's a lot of Hawaiian jargon in the story. And she says, oh, I'd like to learn how to do the hula. So she's like, well, there's no time like the present. So she gets up, and he teaches her the moves, and pretty soon the drums are beating, and she's really going at it. And they're just really hitting it off. And, you know, grandfather comes over and says, hey, you know, that was the nuptial dance. You know, you're one of the family now. So she's like in love, and they decide that they're gonna check things out. She's gonna see Hawaii. So they go, you know, and the grandfather is telling her all these stories. Look at that. great work. So he's telling her, yeah, you know, it could take a lifetime to see all the islands. And she's like, well, you know, I'm young. So it's love. And they decide to go. Let me see. Man, that's some good artwork. I'd love to find some originals from these pages. Here's where she says she's young. Sorry about that. So they take a ride in the airplane and then with a couple other couples, and they go to the Big Island. And she's like, wow, this is really beautiful. And he takes her to the volcano, and they're watching the volcano, the lava running in the volcano. She says, let's go someplace a little less spectacular. And he proposes to her. And she's like, well, I won't marry you now, but I will in a couple weeks. And they live happily ever after. Isn't that beautiful? Some great stuff. Sometimes they would have these little letter pages, and they would have different artists do illustrations. And this one has some Nieto illustrations. Jennifer's Corner. Very nice. Nice. And this one is called He's Not For Her. It's this woman and this man, they're getting engaged, and her little sister is watching, and she's like, I'm gonna break them up. They're not right for each other. Mala and Theo. Theo's the little sister. So she decides, I'm gonna break them up, but I have to be subtle about it. They can't guess what I'm doing. So they go in the house, and she introduces herself. He gives her a big kiss, and she's like, well, you know, I guess you can tell that she likes you. So that night she's dreaming about it and thinking, oh, I've got to do something about this. Got to be very careful that neither of them guess that I'm trying to break them up. Just, you know, his little incidentals, just the little house scenes, they're so nice. And look at that bedspread. It's so nice. So they go to she starts turning down dates, and so she can go places with them, and they go to the beach, and she's like, oh, you know, Mala's never gonna stop tanning. Why don't we go swimming? And he's like, well, okay. So you get the obligatory swimming scene. And they play tennis, and Theo's a better tennis player. There's no writing credits on these, but they're kind of formulaic, and most of them that I've seen credits are written by Joe Gill. Like he was very prolific. So I don't know whether he wrote these stories or not. I'm driving in the countryside. Oh, so she takes him to pick up his car, and they stop at her friend's house. They were going to introduce her to his girlfriend. And they're like, oh, this is your girlfriend? No, she's just her little sister. And everyone's like, yeah, sure, just her little sister. So she talks her off, and she gives him a smack. So her mother's kind of upset when she goes in. What's wrong? Oh, Mala was crying. Her old boyfriend called, and you know, they had broke up, and she swore she'd never see him again. So Theo goes in to see her, and she's like, oh, you know, how could he call me after he broke my heart? And so Theo sees an opportunity. So she calls him up. And she goes and sees him. He explains that he had this job in the Middle East, and it could have been dangerous, and he wasn't sure he could come back. That's why he broke up with Mala. But he missed her all this time, and he was really in love with her. So Theo invites him for dinner, and also the other guy. So they're getting ready for the big meeting, and so of course Theo makes a move on her man, and I don't know what's going on here. Stories all start to blend together. It's just the artwork is so cool. So as it turns out, the two couples end up together, and they live happily ever after. And one more by Enrique Nieto, No More Kisses. So she meets this guy, and they're hitting off at a party, but she gets an emergency phone call from her father. Hey, the doctor says it's important. So she's like, wait right here with what you're going to say. And she goes to the phone, and it's like, oh no, your dad had a heart attack. Oh, I'll be there right away. So she just runs out on the guy and never sees him again. But she goes, and her father's in the hospital, and like her mother had died young. So they're really close. So the doctor says, oh, he needs total peace and quiet. So they sell their house and move out to the seaside where they have a little shack. And she's like drawing and writing and selling stories to a magazine in the city. And they recommend a literary agent. So this guy comes out to meet her. And he's like, well, why don't you come to town so I can introduce you to some TV people. And she's like, oh, I can't leave my father alone here. Nice bird action there. So not many people are dedicated like you are. But that's just the way it is. So he starts coming out to see her, and he really hits it off with her and her old man, and starts to take him fishing, and so he's getting a little better. And father can tell that they're really getting along together. So finally, he says, "Oh, I noticed a shack down at the beach. Maybe I'll rent it." Yeah, so and so used to live there. It's not a bad place. So, he starts coming, pretty regularly. He's living down there on the weekends. Such a great outfit. And just the little flourishes he puts in the background. So cool. Enrique Nieto. So he comes up with this idea, I talked to the doctor, and he said it would be okay if you come and visit my folks in upstate. They've got a nice place. So they decide to go and they visit, and there's like they've got a little shack out back where they let him stay. It's like kind of a nice place. And he's like, I convinced my family and my parents to rent you this house for cheap. She's like, why are you doing this? He says, I think you know. And she's like, yeah, I guess I do. So I want to marry you. Oh, and that's the end. And there's his signature. Nieto. Nieto. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little video and you got to know an artist that maybe you didn't know before, and I hope you appreciate his work as much as I do. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and dig Enrique Nieto's art as much as I do. And if you like this video, then like it. And I appreciate any comments you make, and share it and follow and all that good stuff. So we fade out. Hello. In today's video, we're going to talk about the artwork of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez in Charlton romance comics. Here are a few examples. First, we'll look at Love Diary number 67 from 1968. It's got the Garcia Lopez cover, which is taken from the splash page. It's a nice romance ad. This fantastic man. Oh, this girl, she's good looking, but she's always dreamed about the right guy to come along, but she's shy. I think that Garcia Lopez was really accomplished when he came to Charlton. This is one of the earlier stories that I have by him. And the artwork is really quite good. This girl, she just can't forget this guy, so she can't seem to make it with any guy. That just keep breaking up, and she gets a bad reputation, or she thinks she has a bad reputation, and she's going to be an old maid. So she decides to head out west. On her way, she goes to a hotel and stops at a hotel and sees this guy by the pool, but wouldn't you know, she's got a girl. So she gets out west, and she finds a nice place to live. And right away, this guy comes up to her, but she's like, oh, my makeup's all messed up. So she just kind of like blows him off. And she's like, oh, why did I do that? Guess I'm so shy. So the next day, he's out by the pool waiting for her, and she's like, oh, I can't go down there. So she waits till it's almost dark, and then she goes out, and she thinks nobody's there. And of course, he's there waiting for her. And she's like, she's shy, and she's surprised. And she greets him, but she jumps right in the pool. It's good Charlton swimming art there. And she decides, well, I'll talk to him nicely when I get out. So she comes out, Mr. Coates. Oh, he won't bother me again, she says with a tear. So she's writing in her diary about, her misery and how she likes this guy, but she ruined it with him. So they're having a party at the club room, and they invited her, and she's like, well, I'll go down there. And as she's going, she's like, oh, I didn't realize I had my diary. I got to put this in the car. So she goes, and she sits in the car writing in her diary. Look at that. Lovely moonlight scene. Really nice artwork. So she's fantasizing in her diary about the guy she met. And then how she thinks it's gonna go. Then finally she puts it down, and the guy is like watching her from afar. And she puts down her diary and goes into the party. And then she meets up with him, and they start talking, and they break the ice. And then as they're dancing and having fun, I guess they got a live band at the party. So the guy takes her out and, wait a minute, I gotta take you somewhere and show you something. And she's like, what is this? And he takes her out, and she's like, oh, this is the way I wrote it in my diary. And he finally kisses her. It's almost exactly like I imagined it would be. So she says, oh, this is just like I imagined it would be. She says, yes, I know all about it. I found your diary outside your car when you left. Oh, you didn't read my diary, did you? Oh, just the last 2 entries, just to see who I fell in love with. Oh, Terry, this time it's real. I can't fall in love on 2 kisses. You'd better kiss me again. Dear diary, the loneliness has ended. I'm where I belong, in the arms of the only man I'll ever love. The end. Next is Secret Romance number 7, which also has a Garcia Lopez cover. This story, An Eternity Without Love. So this guy brings his friend home from medical school named Jim, and introduces him to his sister Florence. And he says, well, he's from New Mexico and he's got a girlfriend, but go ahead and kiss him anyway under the mistletoe. And the family is like, oh, he's such a fine boy. This is a couple years later, and the art is still very good. It's not quite as lavish. I think maybe he feels like he's proved himself by now, but his layouts are very strong, and the illustration is wonderful. So they go out, they go ice skating, and she's going to be his date for the week while he's in town. And he tells her, oh, you know, my father was killed. He was a missionary, and he was killed delivering supplies to the Navajo, and my mother died before that. And she's like, so she, on Christmas morning, she gets up early, and he's down there studying already. So she says, I'll make us breakfast, and we're not going to church until noon, then we can go out and take our sleds and go sledding. So it's like, okay. So they go, and I don't know, she's got a dog sled or something, I don't know, but it takes off, and he's on ice skates. I mean, it just seems weird, but maybe that's the way, I got a feeling that he's interpreting it differently than what the writer wrote. But she has a wreck, and he pulls her over. He pulls up to her and checks her out. No broken bones. You know, you're okay. But for a moment, my heart almost stopped. So he checks her out, and she's okay. She says, oh, well, you can't get emotional about your patients. He says, oh, doctors feel things, Florence. So he helps her up, gets a little feel there. I'm so glad we're friends, Jimmy. And thank you for helping me. So she kisses him. Oh, that's my first fee, Florence. And one I'll always remember. And she's like, oh, you know, he's going to be a doctor, and somebody else is going to be with him. Oh, so terrible. So she's like, oh, the time's up, you're going to take off, but be sure to write my parents and let us know how you are. I know you mean it, Florence. I'll miss you. So during the summer, she thinks about him, and he writes saying, yeah, her brother is back, and he's like ahead of him in class, I guess. And so now he says that Jim's alone in Boston at at college. So she decides, well, I could get a job in Boston and just be his friend. His mother's like, yeah, you're crazy going up here and doing this for this guy when you should be looking for a husband for yourself. I know, Mother, I'm a fool. Now goodbye, and thanks for helping me get settled. So she calls up Jim. May I speak to Jim Gavin, please? Just all the little touches in the house, the lamp, the pillows. Very nice. So Jim is like, oh, Florence, this is fabulous. I was just thinking about that time we went sledding and you kissed me. So she's like, well, why don't you come over? I'll cook dinner. I know you got a lot of studying to do, so you could bring your books and study while I'm cooking. So they get together, and he studies while she reads the paper. So finally, he says, it's getting late. You want to have some coffee and pie before you leave? He's like, yeah, I want some of that pie. So they leave. Good night, my darling, she says, out of his hearing range. So she talks him into going to the beach. And so she starts asking him about this girl at home, and he's like hemming and hawing. And she's like, a girl can tell when a guy's in love with someone else, and you don't look at me like you're in love with someone else. Says, look, I've got enough troubles without starting a fight. If you think I'm a liar, I better leave. We came in my car, remember? And you're not going anywhere. You won't leave me, will you, Jimmy? Sweetheart, So finally he comes clean. Tells him there's no girl. He's just like, he didn't think she'd want to be the wife of a missionary. It'd be a hard life. She's like, oh, I love you. Stop talking, darling. Kiss me. And so there they are, together at last. The end. And here's another Charlton Romance ad. Charlton Romance Comics, where the heart is. This next story is from Career Girl Romances, number 71 from 1972. It's called Stubborn Heart. And this girl, she falls in love with this guy, and she's 20 and he's a little older, and she's really in love with him, and things are going really well, she thinks. And will always be this way, my dearest. Yes, Eve, you know how I feel about you. There's the signature, Garcia Lopez, 1171. So one night they go to this play, and he's like distracted, and she's like, Peter, I thought it was hilarious. Did you? Is something wrong, Peter? Because I didn't laugh at the infantile humor, Eve. I'm tired. I'm taking you straight home. You certainly do seem upset, Peter, My cousin is here with his wife. I'll ride home with them. So that's like the end, and he breaks off, and she never sees him again until 6 years later. She sees him she's the executive secretary in this office, and she sees him. He's applying for a job. It's been a long time, Eve. I didn't think you'd remember me. You're my first beau. A girl doesn't forget that. I suppose not, Eve. And I got a cane. I applied for his job here, but I suppose I'll be turned down. I'll call you, Peter, as soon as I know. You left a phone number, haven't you? And he's like, oh, don't bother. They can let me know by mail that they're turning me down. And her boss comes out. Too bad, he's almost perfect for the job. You mean you don't want him because he has a cane? Of course not. It's just his attitude. Probably because of the cane. Mr. Osborne, I've never done this before, but please give Peter that job. We did go together a long time ago, but Peter's probably married by now. Very nice backgrounds, the urban, from the office to the urban center, back to the office. Very nice. Good telephone art. Wow. Have you ever seen a phone like that? So she goes, she gets a letter saying that he's hired, and she goes to see where he lives. And he lives in this rooming house in a bad part of town. He's like, oh, she can't be married to live there. So at last Peter comes in. So it's like 4 days after he gets the letter, before he comes into work. He comes in the office and he asks to see her. Even if it'll make you uncomfortable to work in the same office, I won't mind, Peter. I don't hate you. And so Peter comes to work in the office, and he does really well. And Mr. Osborne, the boss, thinks he's really great. What happened to you, Peter? You just dropped out of sight for 6 years. What happened? I guess it must have seemed strange, Eve. But she said, don't worry, he's like, where am I? Oh, so Peter asked her to type a report that's changes that, it's really drastic and will change things up for the company. And she's like, well, if you do this, they might fire you. She says, well, it doesn't matter. You won't be affected. If you have to leave, I think I'll die over again, thinks Eve. He's got courage. So the boss looks at the plan and he says, wow, this is really great. I think we're going to try it. And so Peter tells her a little bit about his past. How he had a leg infection and they thought they were going to have to amputate his leg. Let's talk in here. So he tells her all the story, and she's like, you think I wouldn't have stood by you? Do you mean you love me even the way I am? The way you are is perfect, Peter. Mr. Osborne thinks you're wonderful, and so do I. This is the most wonderful day of my life. Kiss, kiss, the end. Then finally, we come to I Love You, number 95 from 1972. It's a wonderful cover, isn't it? Signed Garcia Lopez. Emancipated Amanda. Look at that panel. Isn't that cool? She's in high school and she's like a real swinger. All the boys want to date her. And she's like, wow, this is really great. It's going to be even better when I get to college. So she gets to college. Immediately the guys are hitting her up. Hey, meet me at the burger place in half an hour. She She says, well, maybe I'll try. So she runs upstairs, finds her room. She's hoping she's got a good roommate. And she meets her roommate. And she says, oh, well, I've got to hurry. I've got a date with this cat. And she's like, I feel sorry for you, Amanda. She says, you feel sorry for me? What, Dorothy? What kind of crack is that? Oh, nothing, Amanda. You're just a casualty in the war of the sexes. You're putting me on. I'm not a casualty. I'm only going to a hamburger with this cat. So she goes and she's dates the football players, and she thinks she's having a great time. But Dorothy's there telling her, you know, hey, look, you know, you're acting crazy. And so after the game, he's like, oh, Amanda, I was thinking about you when I made that touchdown. And she's like, oh, yeah, you're lying, but I love it. He's like, oh, I'm mad about you, Amanda. You're the living end. So he goes off, and she's like, So then a half hour later, while Amanda is rapping with some kids outside, she happens to look into the shadows, and Dan is with another girl. How could he? Yeah, Garcia Lopez, he's quite an artist. Now, do you see what I mean? Dan doesn't treat you like an equal. You're only a woman. Dorothy, this time there's no more nonsense. He says, you should wear those ridiculous styles. You're making yourself attractive to women, but you're just a sex symbol. So she tells him all, she lays it out for him, and she decides she's gonna try to be more of a woman's liber. So the next day she wears sports clothes, and they blow off the attentions of the guys. And so they're having this woman's road rally, and this guy comes up, hey, I'm from such and such a magazine, and he's talking to her. And Dorothy notices the guy he's with, and she's like, did you notice that other guy? And so back at the room, she's like, you think I'll ever gain weight? Think I'll always be so skinny? I don't know, Dorothy. What does it matter? And Dorothy's like, no woman wants to look absolutely hideous. Dorothy keeps mentioning Godwin and that beanpole he was with. I wonder. So she calls him up, the guy at the magazine, Godwin, and she kind of talks him into coming to a meeting, talk about the article. And so they all hit it off, and they decide to go out on it. And she's like, you know, why can't women ask men for a date? And he's like, oh, are you asking me out? Well, if she's interested, why not? So the two girls ask the guys for a date, and they decide to go out. So they go, and Dorothy gets dressed to the nines, and Amanda's all dressed up, and they go to the beach. And nature takes its course with both couples. So the next day, she's like, oh, Amanda, you don't have to throw away those jeans. You know, you can wear them for going to the beach or doing work around the house. She's like, I'll be getting tighter fitting ones than these. The end. So much for woman's lib, I guess. Well, that's my look at the Charlton artwork of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. If you like this video, then like it. And be sure and make a comment or subscribe if you feel like it. Enjoy. Hello. This video is about another great Charlton comic artist named Ernesto Garcia. That's where he signed most of his work. His real name was Ernesto Garcia Rudolfo Cejas. He was an Argentinian who started drawing at the age of 17 and worked on a number of different projects. And I'll be putting up some of his other artwork in between the books. This first one comes from 1967. He did the cover. Trapped for an Unwary Heart. I'm not going to go into the stories. I'm just going to highlight the artwork. This is an earlier work from 1967, but I always consider him the good artist from especially the early pre-70 Charltons. The art was mainly figures, which he does very well. Backgrounds are not that much to speak of. The exteriors are a little better, but not that much. And his cars are good. And his facial expressions, he excels in that. And she dreams of romance. And in the office, she's got her ears perked up, wants to know what's going on. I'll show him how feminine I am. Uh-oh, sounds like a challenge. Uh-oh, she's getting out the war paint. All right, looking good. The results are worth the trouble I went to. Avery's eyes almost bulge out of his head. The artwork is very understated compared to other artists. And of course, all that work pays off. A little kiss, a little romance, and it pays to be a career girl. Next we have Teenage Love from 1968. It's quite an involved cover here. I think these are cut and paste from the inside stories usually. Never say I love you. Never say I love you. You can see already he's loosened up a little bit. This is just a year later, 6 months later. It's more decorative in the background and better colors too. Look at that little background there. It's tremendous. Oh no, it's a crash. She doesn't appear on the accident report, but she feels bad about it. I'll never let anything like this happen to me again. it's just darn good artwork. The stories, I can take them or leave them. I mostly just look at the pictures, to be frank. There's kind of a complex panel. Dennis is nice, but he'll never take Gary's place. She says that before he moves in. Yeah, you can see these panels that were reworked into the cover. He's fun. So they yak it up. Looks like the disco. And go, Jimmy, go for a touchdown. Good, nice legs there. Another complex panel there. It's really nice stuff. Seems like a little Al Williamson background there. At this time, I think he was doing a lot of westerns in Argentina. Romance and the end. Next we have Teen Confessions, also from 1968. Some couples in the background there. Breakup. Tomorrow I'll tell him. Tonight we make out. ERG, Ernesto Rodolfo Garcia. These various signatures at this time period. A deer in the headlights. Hey, what are you doing? I can give you a ride. Uh-oh. He's a clean cut guy. She decides to go with him. He takes him to a party. He's a lot of fun. Oh no. The guy she ditched, and he's furious. And of course she's going to take a swing at the guy she's with. That never turns out well. Boom. Absolutely beautiful. New boyfriend. Gives it to the old boyfriend. And of course there's no question about who she's going home with. Mr. Clean Cut. They're getting closer. She's thinking about it. You can tell. The little silhouettes. What's the idea of bringing my daughter home this late, this hour? You young... Oh, you're not the guy I thought you are. Well, I guess you're okay. Yeah, well, my dad likes you. And that night she dreams of romance. So the next day they go to the beach, and there he is again. He's gonna start something again. Pow! Little judo, little karate. Boom, throws the guy. So close. Well, let's go in the water. And they kiss in the deep. Aw, isn't that sweet? And then later, golly, this could get to be a habit. A wonderful, wonderful habit. The end. Next is an issue of Romantic Story, also from 1968. Little beach cover. Nice scene. And as usual, it's the splash page. I don't want to be different. Relax, doll, this won't hurt a bit. Ugh, I hate it when you kiss me like that. Let's see, slipping or something, I don't know. But she breaks away. Sheesh, what a creep. So she's doesn't know why am I different. So she goes back and the guitar player spots her. He's different too. Funny he doesn't have a girl like the others. Mike's with Lola. She's anybody's girl. Get the picture, princess? Oh, how horrible. So he takes off with anybody's girl. Leaves her at the beach. What a creep. But what's this? Oh, it's the guitar player. Oh, he's got a car. And he takes her home. And apparently he doesn't make too much of a move. And she's thinking about him. Look at that work. It's so beautiful. And the next morning, she talks it over with Mom. Why am I different? Oh, you're just a good girl. The rest of them are sluts. Yeah, you're right, Mom. Where do you meet this guy? He's a guitar player. More of this business. Always reminds me of Al Williamson in the 50s. And they're back at the beach. So the other guys are going to make a play for her. But she's different. She winds up alone. But then here comes the other guy. It's always the guys in the glasses. You mean you wanted to talk? Of course, Hank. If you really want to. Ah, she wants to talk. She is different. So, yakety yak. Not yet. It's too soon. But she's thinking about it. And another day. Maybe. Yes. I'm so glad I never felt this way before. That's what I dreamed of and wanted. And Hank is the only man I will ever love. The end. And finally, from October of '68, we have Sweetheart Comics. And this is kind of a nice contrast cover. A few horses. Dude Ranch Darling. And of course, that's the splash page. Wordy, 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 wordy. But look at that sky. Look at that girl. Look at that guy. Nice. So they're hitting it off right from the start. It's a good excuse to get some horses in. Of course, he's been a good Western artist in other lands. And it's kind of a stereotype left over from the olden days. I was awake half the night remembering that kiss, but I don't compete for Tom. So he's kissing them all. So she gets on the horse and takes off with that kiss still in the background. Look at that. Nice. This is a Charlton, remember? Nice. Nice nature work. Is that an elk? And she must be in some kind of danger. Something going on. She's thrown from her horse. What's going on in the background there? Is that like a stream or a lake or a pond? He's looking for her. Ooh, thunder. It's gonna rain. Oh no, she's getting soaked. She may be high enough. Then the rain comes with the splitting thunder and blinding flashes of lightning. There's only one thing I could do. And of course she closes her eyes and prays her heart out. And the rain stops. Thank you, Lord. And then Tom Crimmins isn't far away. Finds her horse, so she must be nearby, I guess. Good thing he's got batteries in his flashlight. And there she is. Tom, darling, what will I do? Just stay right there, honey. She's high and dry somewhere. Not exactly sure what's going on there, but it's kind of dramatic. Gets her in, gets her out. I guess they couldn't wade out of there. Nice figure work. He crawls out, and she's in his arms briefly, but she's all wet, so he covers it with his jacket, builds a little fire. You'll make someone a fine husband, she says. gotten out of her pants, I noticed. And they warm up by the fire. And of course, he's got his coffee pot with him. Rider's coming. I reckon you better put your dry clothes on now. Huh? All right. So she gets dressed as the others come up to find him. Why didn't I think of almost getting drowned in a flood? Oh, the other girls are jealous. The end. Well, there's a peek at the wonderful art of Ernesto Garcia in Charlton romance comics. He was really big in Argentina. He did work in Italy and Spain and all over. Really respected work, and his work at Charlton has been largely forgotten, which I think is a shame because he did some really great work. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, like it. And don't forget to leave a comment and like it and all that other good stuff. And we'll see you next time. Hello. This is the latest in my series of Charlton comic artists. This one is devoted to Nicky Zann. Nicholas Zann was best known as a fine artist. He was a born and raised New Yorker, lived there all his life and died there in 2020. I'm going to put a link down below to his website so you can check him out, his fine art. His biography and stuff doesn't mention his stint at Charlton, but he did do a lot of illustrations and stuff, and he had kind of an interesting career. His early stuff was a little bit crude, but by the end of the stories I've got, the earliest one I have is from 1971, and I've got a few from 72, and then one from 75, which shows a lot of improvement. First one is called Please Darling, and it's about this girl Teresa, and she's got her boyfriend Carl, and they live in this fishing village in New England, but she wants to get out of there and go to New York. So she's like, I'm going to get him to take me to New York. And he's like, well, you know, I'd like to take you, but my father needs help. And she's like, well, I need your help too. So she tells her father she's going to New York, and he's like, well, I guess I can't chain you to your room. And she says, well, Carl's going to drive me to the bus stop. So Carl takes her and he says, okay, I'm going to drive you to New York. So they get to New York City, and he's like, how do you like the big city? And she's like, oh, look at all the people. After that small town, it looked like something. So he fixed it up so he can stay with his aunt, and he's going to stay somewhere close by. So his Aunt Nora welcomes her and gets her a job. And so within 3 days, she's a working girl in New York. And so she meets this guy in the office, and they're leaving. And she's like, oh, I forgot that Carl was going to be waiting for me. And the guy's like, well, I didn't know you had a guy waiting for you. And he's like, well, you know, we're not married or engaged. If she wants to go out with you, you know, go ahead. So the days go by, and she dates this guy, and You know, they go to clubs, you know, where it's groovy. And so one day, soon, he says, you know, she runs into Carl. She's like, oh, Carl hasn't called me in a while. And so he says, so she runs into him and he says, I've been waiting for you, Teresa. It's like, Cal, what's wrong? I'm going home. You've had your fun, Teresa. If you want to come home, man, Laura, you know, she's pissed at you, and if you don't want to come, she wants you to move out one way or the other. And she's like, leave? Listen, Cal, wait one more day, one more week, and I'll tell my boss. And the guy's like, you don't have to do what he says. He's nothing but mouth. So Kyle goes off on him. Pow! She's like, well, you know, I guess I'm just gonna stay here. So she's partying in New York and having a good time, but she keeps thinking about Cal. And, you know, like one day she goes, I haven't heard from him, and then finally got a letter. She's like, and it's like a Dear Teresa letter. He's gonna marry this other girl, and the letter is brief, heartbreaking. Cal is going to marry some other girl. He wanted me to know. The end. Heartbreak. The next Zann story is called The Wildlife, and it's inked by Chuck Alisea. The thing I can say about Zann's art, he's not real flashy, but he has this angular style of drawing people. And so these kids are partying in the woods, and this guy, he's a park ranger, and he says, you know, it's illegal to have forest fire anywhere in California. You're going to be under arrest. So the guy's like, oh, you're not going to arrest us, and they kind of rough him up a little bit. And the girl is like, you know, hey, don't do that. You know, you're stupid. And so she pulls the guy's hair, and the guy gets in the ranger gets away and flips the other guy, and they jump on their bikes and take off. So the girl is left behind with the ranger. He's like, well, don't worry, I got their license plates. You know, we'll get them. And he's like, yeah, you could be in trouble for this too. And she's like, oh well, yeah, I didn't know those guys. I worked with that girl, and she asked me to come out today. So he says, well, you know, since you stopped me from getting a beating, I guess I'll just take you home. And she's like, is that all you do, is hassle people out in the woods? He's like, of course not. I'm doing a census on wildlife in the area. So he takes her home, and he's like, well, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing you dancing like that under more pleasant circumstances. He says, oh, you're a peeping Tom, huh? I better go in. But then she says, well, you know, if you really meant what you said, you know, you got my number. And he says, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. So she goes in and tells her folks about what happened. And her father's like, oh, you know, I'm pissed off about it. You know, I should do something to that guy. And says, well, the ranger was nice. It's kind of an interesting play on the panels here. With the mother and father on the left, and then she's in the center between the two panels, and then they're on the right. Looks like there's 4 people on the panel, but really it's just 2 panels. He was known for his diptychs, and that was a style that he did in his art later on. So the ranger comes by the next day, and his dad's having trouble with the lawnmower, so he gives him some advice on fixing it. And they go to the beach and have some fun. and they're like laying on the beach, and she's like, oh, you wouldn't kiss a girl in public. She's like, ha. And she's like, oh, he's wonderful. So he takes her, and they meet these tame deer that he had saved the year before from a forest fire. And things are heating up between them. And boom. I think I found you, darling. I have. I think I found her, darling, and just what I wanted. This next story is when you got it, flaunt it. So this girl Claudia, she's kind of insecure, and she's been seeing this guy, but he decides to dump her. It's outside this club, and so she's all upset. And these two people, they see her, and they said, "Oh, you know, we saw that. That was terrible. Can we help you?" And she's like, "No, I just need to be alone." So they say, "Oh, well, yeah, we'll take you home." And so we gotta make a stop on the way. So they stop at this coffee house to see the woman's husband. They're I guess they're brother and sister, and she's married to the guy that owns this coffee shop. So Claudia and this guy Lou are sitting there, and they kind of hit it off. And she's like complaining because she's so tall and skinny and mousy looking and nearsighted. He's like, "Hey, you're not bad at all. I saw you dancing. You're pretty good. Not everybody, it's nice to be seen with a tall girl." But she's down on herself. And so it turns out that the woman has a gym, and she's like, "Well, I don't need a gym. I'm skinny as it is." And he says, "No, I can teach you other things." So a couple days later, she goes to the gym, and she says, you're a pretty girl, but your biggest problem is posture. So I'm going to give you some exercises to improve your posture. And then pretty soon she starts getting more confidence, and Lou is asking for her, and she's like, "I can't believe this guy likes me." I don't know. The work is serviceable. It's not really great, but like in this story, this is the only panel that really tells me it's Zann by just the figure drawings. You can see the backgrounds are just kind of rudimentary in here. So he asks her out, and they go to the ball game. And she's like, "Oh, this is great, My brother was a big baseball fan. She knew more about baseball than he did." So he's like, "Oh, you're not wearing glasses?" And she says, "Oh, I can see far away. I just need them for reading and stuff like that." So he takes her home, and you have the look of a girl who's about to get kissed. I have, and so they kiss. So the next day she goes to the gym, and she's like, "I want to take the long course. I want to get looking really great." And she's like, "Oh, well, you're there. You got the posture. I'm just going to show you some makeup tips." And so she gets her ready for the date and gives her some new glasses. And she's like, "There, now you're like a new woman." She comes out, and he's like, "Wow, you look great." So glad you think so, Lou. I did it all for you. Shush, darling. It's time for love. The end. The next story is called "Let the Teardrops Fall." And this came out the same month as that last story, in August of 1972. And you can see his artwork is still very simple. His story is like a big nothing story. He's like, she heard this guy is like a real fast mover and all the girls tell her to stay away from him. But she's like, oh well, I'm just not going to be possessive. And the girls keep warning him he's no good, but she like keeps him on. She like keeps him at arm's distance. So finally, you know, after they've been going out and hitting off and on for a couple of years, he wants her to go skiing. So they go skiing. And she's like, well, you know, you go ski, I'll just find a ski instructor that teaches me how to run on these things. So she's like, she's with the instructor and he's out on the trails. She's like, well, you know, he's on his own at night, but not on his own in the daytime, but at night he's all mine. So finally he's like, you know, you're the greatest, will you marry me? And she's like, oh, I've been waiting, I've been in love with you since the first day we met. I made up my mind the first day we met. I prayed that you would feel the way I do, and my prayer has been answered. And they live happily ever after. The end. This last story is called My Secret Love. This is a lot, you can see this story is from 1975, and you can see he's come a long way with this comic art. His figure drawings are still kind of elongated and distinctive. She's like, oh, I'm in love with this guy, but he has to be destroyed. So it starts out, she's in school and she's hanging out with this guy and he's like bad news. He's like, you know, let's get out of school, let's go to Malibu. So she jumps on the motorcycle with him and they take off. And he's like, oh, he's driving too fast. See, he's gotten a lot better drawing cars too. So a cop starts chasing him and so he won't be able to follow me up here. So he takes off, you know, up onto the beach. And drives kind of crazy, but he thinks he lost him, and he comes out and he comes back onto the road, and there's the cop waiting for him. And the cop's like, well, I'm just kidding. It's not like today where they would have, you know, he would have beat him to death or killed him. He's just like, oh, I'm gonna write you a ticket. So the guy's all pissed off and he says, if I ever catch you without that badge, fuzz, I'm gonna knock you out. And he's like, yeah, well. So then they're at the beach, and you can tell the girl is a good girl because she's always dressed, and all the other girls are really, you know, really being slutty. And so she's like, well, you know, I'm kind of afraid of this guy. I don't really like kissing him, but there's nothing else I can do. She's like, well, I'm gonna get a ride home with Linda, and she's like, here, take the car. I don't want to. I'm gonna ride home with it on Smoky Sickle. And then he's like, oh, you better not break the speed limit. That creep's waiting for you. She says, don't worry, I'm doing 50. That's the limit. So the next day, this guy shows up at the beach, and they're like, "Oh, ditch it! You know, we don't know this guy." So he says, "Hey, you know, I knew so and so, and he said to look you up. He gave me your description so I could tell you who you were." And they're like, "Oh, well, you know, you seem cool." So he starts hanging out with these guys, and he's like, "Don't you get mad that guy's, you know, is making plays for other girls?" And she's like, "Well, I don't like it, but there's nothing I can really do about it. You want to take a walk on the beach?" So they go out and walk on the beach, and she says, "I want you to kiss me." And she's like, "Yeah, that was really good. I don't really like kissing that other guy." So they go back, and he says, "I'm gonna make a play for you." And he's like, "Well, you better be careful." So he makes a play for the guy, and he tries to get his friends to stop him from cutting in, and they're like, "Hey, he's your chick. It's up to you." So he takes over with the pretty girl. You can see he's gotten a lot more. I don't know whether he inked it himself or he's just got a better inker, but there's a lot more detail in the art in this story. So he's like, "Well, I got to tell you something. I'm a cop, and we're about to bust this guy's." So he moves in, and they arrest him. And he's like, "Oh, that girl, she finked on us." So he goes to, she pulls a knife on her and starts to make a lunge at her, and the cop just beats him up. And all the girls are like, "Well, we don't mind that those guys got busted. We didn't know they were selling drugs." And she's like, "Oh, well, he'll never want to have anything to do with me now." But then he shows up at her house, and she's like, "Oh, do you really like me? I'm glad, I'm sorry. I'm never going to run with that crowd again. I'm going back to college." Says, "I'm glad." And they're like, boom, they're together. Well, that was a taste of Nicholas Zann's Charlton romance comic artwork. Hope you enjoyed these few examples and got something out of it. I wouldn't say he's a great comic artist like Nieto or the other artists that I've done in this series, but he's serviceable and interesting in the fact that he was a fine artist in other genres. So if you like this video, like it. And I'm always happy to hear your comments and like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thank you.